What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the top 3 best builds in part of Exile's 2 new update, the Rise of the Abyssal. So in this guide I will give you a quick overview of each setup, then I will explain what skill gems and upgrades should you focus on, then as well we'll see what is the best gear and how to get it, and then finally we will go over the passive tree, stats, your skill rotations, and even what Atlas passive should you use, so we would be able to get the highest damage possible and much more. And remember, if you want to check these builds, look up the best items, the skill trees and part of building, then check my links in the description. And before we continue, thanks to Top Up Live, they are a pro website that provides POE2 services like cheap currency, and not only for this game but many more at extremely cheap prices and much more. They also have hundreds of positive comments on Trustpilot, and this website is really worth a try, so make sure to use my discount code KATE for extra 12% off, and on top of it you can sign up and get even more discount coupons that can go up to $80 for free, as well as Top Up Live will offer cheap gift cards, CD keys and so much more. So this is truly the all-in-one shop for your gaming needs. This build is brand new in 0.3 update, and I promise you it's everything that you ever wanted if you've dreamed about playing a pure martial artist build. So no clunky weapon swaps, no chasing expensive uniques every 5 levels, and no stressing about the perfect 6-length staff. With this build, your fists are your weapons, and thanks to the hollow palm, those arms will hit like a truck. Now let's be upfront, the core of your gameplay revolves around the Storm Wave and the Upfield for insane map clearing, while Tempest Flurry and the Tempest build will shred bosses and rares with precision combo damage. One thing to note here is that the exact unarmed scaling in POE2 is still being tested, but even if the run numbers change slightly, the mechanic itself is already crazy strong. I love this build because it solves one of the biggest problems for most players, which is the gear dependency. With the hollow palm, you don't need to farm a weapon or even spend much currency. The keystone scales directly off your attributes, your gem levels and your defenses. That means every upgrade you pick up will automatically feed your fists more damage. It's cheap, it's efficient and it's fast. Then second, the setup plays exactly how you want a monk to feel. You're not standing in the back just shooting arrows or waiting for the cooldowns, so you will be constantly moving. And overall, this build clears like lightning fast mapper with huge AoV from the Storm of Wave. But it also has that controlled single target rotations that you need for the big bosses. If you want speed, power and a no weapon build, then you should try this one out. So let's take a look at the skill gems, because this is where the hollow palm monk will really shine. The entire identity of this setup is built around the lightning fast unarmed attacks. That means we are blending rapid melee strikes with spell like elemental procs. Your bread and butter here is the Tempest Flurry. This is your main combo skill, the one that you will be constantly using into the enemies. To really push its damage, you will link it with the rapid attacks, lightning attunement and the elemental armament. Then second we got the Storm of Wave, which is your secondary offensive skill. It gives you a massive AoV nuke that clears screens in seconds, while also boosting your critical potential. Now we need a way to keep charges flowing and the momentum rolling, and that's where the lingering illusion comes in. Paired with the charge profusion, every time you dodge roll, you drop an illusion, and when enemies hit you, you will gain charges. More rolls mean more charges, and those charges are the engine that powers our next skill, the Charge Staff. This skill in exchange will apply shock and innervate by keeping enemies vulnerable to the lightning damage while giving you a steady stream of offensive buffs. It's a perfect loop, so dodge, drop illusions, gain charges, and fuel even more damage. Then for auras, this build takes things to the next level with the Herald of Thunder and with the Herald of Ash. The Herald of Thunder is linked with the Electrocute and the Lightning attunement, and it basically blankets the entire map with the chain lightnings whenever you get a kill. It's the core reason of why mapping feels so smooth. On top of that, the Herald of Ash will provide hybrid scaling, so crits and overkills will trigger fire burn explosions that amplify clear and even stack on the boss damage. Together, these two heralds will create fireworks of chained explosions every time that you attack. And finally, we've got the Tempest Belt. Think of this as a flexible slot. Sometimes it's an AoV option for spreading more coverage, or sometimes it's your single target combo tool against bosses. So in short, it synergizes beautifully with our Flurry. Next up, let's move over to the passive tree, because this is where we take the hollow palm idea and crank it to the max. The general idea is simple. We are investing in dexterity and the energy shield nodes, while stacking attributes notes that the Hollow Palm converts directly into the raw offensive power, while on top of it also picking up hybrid defenses to keep us alive. Early on, you're focusing on survival and consistency, so pick up dexterity, life and evasion so that you can push through the acts without issues. Don't worry about the crit too early, as it's a trap. You only want to start speccing into serious crit clusters like Momentum of Truth, or the hard stopping once you're at level 50 or higher, because that's the point where your base damage, attack speed and weaponless scaling will really justify the crit investment. Defensively, the tree makes you tanky in a clever way, so we're investing into a hybrid evasion and energy shield, and Hollow Palm turns those defensive stats into offensive bonuses. Evasion translates into faster attack speed. Energy shield turns into the crit chance, so you're literally scaling your damage every time you upgrade your gear. On top of that, the life clusters are scattered along the path to keep you stable during the campaign, and masteries will help around the resistances. Offensively, we lean into the rapid unarmed attacks with devastating crits, and we can achieve this by mainly investing into dexterity nodes, because high dexterity not only feeds your accuracy and evasion, but also synergizes perfectly with the Hollow Palm scaling. Alright, now let's go over to the gear, because while the Hollow Palm does not require a weapon, you still need a strong foundation to scale. The golden rule here is simple. Always cap your elemental resistances at 75%, so fire, cold and lightning all need to be maxed. That's the step 1 before you can think about anything else. Then for the main slots, you're aiming for max life, energy shield and any type of regen. The most optimized pieces that I like is for the helmet, the Vermeil circlet, then for body, the Valve robe, then the belt, the Rawhide belt, then for boots, the bound boots, and for the gloves, the hunting. Then on top of it, get accessories like the Topaz ring, a ruby ring and a stellar amulet. These will give you elemental resistances, life, energy shield, and most importantly, the attribute scaling. Attributes are crucial because the Hollow Palm directly converts them into damage. Ideally, you want your amulet rolled with a high life, high energy shield, and all resistances capped, and as much as flat attributes as possible. Remember, every point of dexterity and energy shield is damage. Every point of life and evasion and survivability also scales into the damage. So gearing feels extremely rewarding. You're never wasting stats on defenses, because Hollow Palm turns them into offenses too. This is what makes the build cheap and effective as a league starter. You don't need a big DPS weapon. You just need solid rares with life, resistances and attributes. And as you push into the red maps, start upgrading your defenses with a higher bases, but always prioritize attributes because they feed everything else. And now finally, let's see how to actually play this build. Honestly, this is one of the most satisfying gameplay rotations in Path of Exile 2. In the campaign, you level with a bow and a lightning rod until about level 22. It's smooth, it's fast, and it carries you through the early content without any issues. At level 23, you pick up the Hollow Palm notable and swap to the unarmed combat, and this is where the build transforms. From this point and onwards, your mapping rotation is simple but powerful. Roll into a pack, then drop the Storm Wave to wipe the screen, and weave in upfield for the extra damage spread. And let the Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ash explode everything around you. But perhaps if you need more charges, then dodge roll to drop illusions, and let the enemies fuel your charge staff. If you do this combo perfectly, then packs will just evaporate. Against bosses, the things will shift into a more precise rhythm, so you lead with the Tempest Flurry, then stacking rapid crits and shocks, then drop the Tempest Belt for a devastating combo finisher, then keep your charges flowing with illusions, maintain Herald uptime and stack the Storm Wave hits on top for massive burst windows. But perhaps if the Flurry plus the Bell combo feels uncomfortable, then you can absolutely just stick with the Storm Wave as your main bossing tool until you're more comfortable. So as you can see, our rotation and the build is fun, fast and new player friendly. This build is super unique because instead of avoiding damage, we're actually embracing it. As the more damage we receive, the faster the enemies will melt. The core of this setup revolves around a unique helmet called the Crowd of the Pale King. Without it, the entire concept doesn't work, because this helmet takes every incoming hit and converts it into the Thorns damage, while also triggering effects like the Barbs and the Quill Burst. These not only deal additional retaliation damage, but also give the build that satisfying visual identity. So spikes are erupting, bursts of the barbs are flying out, and enemies are endlessly being punished for trying to hurt you. If you are playing in SSF, then you're going to want to hold off until until you find this helmet, but in the trade leagues, it's your absolute top priority. Then another key piece that boosts this build is the Warbringer's Anvil's Fate mechanic. Traditionally, one of the biggest hurdles for the tanky builds is the clanky downtime when the armor breaks, by leaving you exposed. But with the Anvil's Fate, that entire friction point is removed, so suddenly, maintaining stacks of the scavenge plating is effortless. Your defenses will never collapse, and your retaliation damage just keeps working 24/7. So let's take a look at our skill gems. At the center we got the Thorns skin, and we're using both the Thorns skin 1 and the Thorns skin 2, depending on how much spirit you have available. You need to think of the Thorns skin as your retaliation aura. It needs to be up at all times, and your job is to manage the spirit so you can keep it active consistently. If you invested into additional spirit rolls on your gear, then you can stack multiple Thorns skins together, which will feel amazing because you're essentially wrapping yourself in a double coat of spikes. The more uptime, the more damage monsters will deal to themselves by just hitting you. For endurance and survivability, we rely heavily on the magma barrier, which interacts with the charge regulation to keep endurance charges flowing. And while we are speaking about the endurance charges, they're huge here, because they scale your mitigation and by extension your Thorns damage. To complement this, Resonating Shield is an occasional button press that might not feel that flashy, but it's deceptively strong. Hitting it regularly while mapping will keep your endurance charges topped off and make you feel unstoppable. Defensively, your setup revolves around the scavenge plating, magma barrier and resonating shield, which are all linked with supports that extend duration, reduce cooldowns, or even boost armor scaling. And this is where you see how your defense literally becomes offense. The longer your plating and the barriers stay active, the more enemies beat themselves to death by trying to get through. And then on the offensive side, you're not relying solely on retaliation. Skills like the Rapid Assault and the Rake are slotted in to give us active melee presence. These aren't your main damage dealers, but they will keep the pressure up and ensure that the enemies are constantly pulled in your retaliation field. And lastly, for utility skills, we got the Fortifying Cry, which not only keeps you alive but directly scales Thorn, because increased mitigation will equal the stronger retaliation. With a cooldown recovery linked, you can keep this almost permanently. Then Disengage is your emergency tool. It's a quick reposition button that doesn't get used often, but it feels OP in those moments where you need to dodge a telegraphed boss slam. Then now let's take a look at the passive tree. The first cornerstone is the Iron Reflexes, and it's essential. By converting evasion into armor, it takes stats that normally would not scale retaliation and transforms them into fuel for your Thorns. When you're stacking evasion on the rings, amulets and the gauntlet, the Iron Reflexes will take all of that and skyrocket your armor. This result is not just durability, but also raw damage output, since our retaliation values are based on how much armor you can stack. From there we go into the three main priorities. The first one is the raw defense. You're picking up clusters for the maximum life, armor scaling and endurance charge generation. These nodes give you the staying power to survive constant hits, which is the lifeblood of a Thorns build. If you're not tanky enough to stay in the thick of a combat, then your retaliation never gets the chance to work. Then the second focus is on retaliation scaling itself. The tree will include several passives that boost reflect damage, increase the effect of Thorns and synergize with the physical scaling. Unlike crit focus builds that chase multipliers, this one leans into the consistency. Every hit you take will become guaranteed damage output, and that output will multiply into packs where the monsters swing rapidly. And then finally, our last focus is on utility and sustain. Regeneration nodes, block recovery and the cooldown efficiency are all picked along the way. These will give you fluidity to keep your Warcry's barriers and the Thorn skins active without the downtime. It means that you're never caught waiting for a cooldown to cycle or left exposed without your defenses. Next up is the gear, and the first rule of gearing is to upgrade your Thorns gear at the start of every level bracket. The Thorns damage doubles at every stage, and if you neglect upgrades, then you will feel yourself falling behind quickly, so stay on top of it, and your damage will always feel smooth. The best in slot shield is the China Box Pillar. This thing takes your retaliation damage to ridiculous heights, especially when paired with a scavenge plating. If you can get a corrupted version with the Thorns damage, then that's the best in slot. Then your spear does not need to deal DPS directly. Instead, look for modifiers that boost Thorns indirectly, so things like gain percentage of damage as extra damage, and sockets for the Sakaval's Rune of the Sky. Then for boots, the Briar Patch is your target, ideally with 2 sockets and a corruption for the high movement speed. Then the body armor should be in a high armor base, with maximum life and resistances. You can go for spirit rolls if you want, but remember that usually it will cost you a maximum life roll, so the trade-off is up to you. Then for Amulet, the Solar Amulet is best in slot. You want one with another spirit roll, maximum life, percentage increased maximum life, and capped resistances. Then our belt should carry a high physical Thorns roll, a high armor base, maximum life and resistances. Then on gloves and rings you wanna fill it with the life, capped resistances, and ideally evasion to scale armor through the armor reflexes. And then anoint is our last thing. If you are on a budget, then go with defensive reflexes for a cheap black anoint. But if you got more to invest, then the Molten Being is a great mix of offense and defense. And then finally, for pure damage, the anoint called Cook will bring extra punch. And now finally, let's see how to actually play this build. The rotation is simple, smooth and incredibly satisfying. You wanna keep the Thorn skin active at all times, because that's your bread and butter and you never want to be caught without it. You'll want to cycle Magma Barrier and the Resonating Shield to keep endurance charges flowing, and then you can drop the Scavenge Plating whenever it's ready, because it multiplies your retaliation damage by a huge amount. Then for offense, you weave in Rapid Assaults and the Rake to keep enemies engaged. They're not going to be the star of the show, but they will keep the pressure on the packs and bosses, while your Thorns do the real work. Then use Fortifying Cry on the cooldown for survivability and retaliation scaling, and keep Disengage in your back pocket for emergencies. When you're mapping, the playstyle is almost brainless in the best way, so you charge into the backs, your Thorn skins will trigger, enemies will slam into you, and they will instantly explode from their own damage. In the dense content like Delirium or Legion, it feels incredible, because the more enemies swarm you, the faster the screen clears. And then when it comes to bosses, it's about patience. You're not trying to burst them down in seconds. Instead, you stay alive to keep your defensive layers rolling, and let the bosses bleed themselves dry. With the Crown of the Pale King and the Scavenge Plating scaling, they will fall shockingly fast, and you will feel completely godlike the entire time. This setup has been absolutely tearing up the endgame after the latest round of buffs, and for a good reason. Crossbows no longer slow your movement speed while reloading, and the Galvanic shard specifically had its reload speed penalty stripped away. Add in the new crossbow support gems and the passive nodes introduced into this new patch, and you end up with a build that feels smoother, faster and deadlier than even before. Now there's one small caveat: you will need to run the new reload crossbow when dodge rolling support gem with the Galvanic shards. That's because they nerfed the reload mechanics so that each action only loads one bolt instead of the entire magazine. But honestly, this feels really natural when you get used to it. Rolling between the packs while reloading will slot perfectly into the rhythm of a combat, and it helps to sell that fantasy of a lightning fast gunslinger. My favorite part about this build that you're constantly zapping, shocking and forking bolts of energy across the screen, while stacking defensive mechanics and utility to stay alive in the thick of a battle. It's one of those builds that feels aggressive and fast paced without sacrificing mobility. You clear maps like machine gun, and when it comes time to fight bosses, you switch the gears into a carefully timed burst combo that erases health bars in seconds. So let's take a look at our skill gems, and at its core we have the Galvanic shards. This skill has been transformed into an absolute monster for both clear speed and utility. When linked with the lightning attunement, the shock, fork and the lightning exposure, you get a setup that not only hits hard but chains and multiplies across the entire screen. The fork makes your shards ricochet into new targets by spreading your damage effortlessly, while lightning exposure reduces enemy resistances, so that every follow-up will hit harder than the last. The shock scaling here is insane. The whole packs will just melt. Then next up we got the shock burst rounds. Think of this as your big AoV hammer. It's a secondary skill that locks down areas and deals devastating bursts of lightning damage. The synergy between the shards for chaining damage and the shock burst for heavy focus hits, it's what it gives this build its dual identity. On top of that, we add utility gems to smooth out the playstyle. Then next, emergency reload linked with the cooldown recovery too is essential. It makes sure that you're never left helpless when you burn through your bolts. Attrition gets slotted in for damage over time pressure against very high HP bosses, giving you that extra edge when fight drags on. And then there's the Wind Dancer, which is your mobility gem of a choice. Paired with the Precision 1, Magnified Area 2 and the MAME, it offers accuracy, control and even the crowd control management, while boosting your survivability. For defenses and curses, the build runs Elemental Weakness, linked with the Focus Curse, Heightened Curse, Prolonged Duration 3 and the Life Tap. This absolutely destroys enemy resistances, and makes your Lightning Punch above its weight. Then on top of it, we add the Sorcery Ward and the Ghost Dance, and suddenly you've got a defensive layer that feels most natural without getting in the way of your aggression. Energy shield recovery, evasion bonuses, and the curses will turn the bosses into a glass cannon, and this is the perfect setup for this build. Then next up we have the passive tree. And for this build it's crafted to really squeeze out every ounce of power from the Witch Hunter's archetype. We will want to start right here in this section, where you immediately pick up the nodes that boost attack speed, accuracy, and dexterity. These will give you that early punch that you need to get Galvanic shards online without feeling sluggish. From there we expand into both the Witch and the Ranger zones by cherry picking the best crit, energy shield, and the elemental penetration nodes. One of the defining features of this tree is how heavily it leans into the critical shock multipliers. So when we combine this with the Galvanic shards, natural shock scaling, the crit nodes will amplify your burst into devastating nukes that delete rares and bosses instantly. But this is not all about offense, we also build it for energy shield scaling. This acts as your safety net in a place of a traditional life pool. With the right keystones and the gear, this creates a hybrid sustain system, where you can absorb hits while recharging quickly through the Ghost Dance and the Sorcery Ward. It's a defensive engine that pairs perfectly with your evasive playstyle. On the defensive side, the lightning penetration nodes are a must-have. These make sure that your bolts slice through the boss resistances and stay active all the way through the endgame. And finally, we invest into the mana sustain and the spell damage increases. You never want to feel like you're running dry mid-battle, and this will ensure that your resources keep up with your speed. And now finally, let's see how to actually play this build. For clearing, the Galvanic shards is your bread and butter. So here's the trick, you should tap fire it rather than just holding down the key. This will cancel out the usual movement penalty while still giving you near 100% attack speed. So you're basically striding through the maps at a full speed, while unleashing a constant storm of lightning shards. And then for single target fights, you want to use the shock burst, but you must make sure that the target is the shock fire first. Apply voltaic mark and connectivity on the bosses or tanky rares, and then just spam your shock burst for devastating bursts, and then just spam shock burst and destroy enemies. With the ascendancy bonuses and the critical multipliers, you will be deleting endgame bosses in seconds, and that's really the loop. Shards for clearing, shock burst for the bosses, and curses for even more buffs. However, if you ever feel stuck on damage, then the solution is almost always a better weapon. So look for plus 500 DPS with physical or the lightning only, and not cold or fire. Rings and gloves with the flat lightning or the physical damage are also easy upgrade. And don't forget to catalyze them for the max value. Then for defenses, focus on the armor quality and energy shield. Upgrade your helmet and the chest first, then quality of your gear for 20% boost. As long as you're sitting around 3000 combined life and energy shield, then you're good to go. The beauty of the setup is how brainless it can feel once you get the rhythm down. Just use the Galvanic shards and everything around you dies. Just dodge roll to reload while moving, then drop the shock bursts on the bosses and keep your curses up. Overall, this mercenary build is simple, fast, and incredibly satisfying to play.